The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
You are now tuned into the PA Power Podcast, College Edition, featuring Mason Beckman and Tristan Warner. PA Power Wrestling. PA Power Wrestling. Pennsylvania is wrestling. Welcome in, Pennsylvania wrestling fans. You are now dialed into the PA Power College Podcast. I'm your host, Tristan Warner, as always, joined by Mason Beckman, a.k.a. Beck Diggity. Mason, welcome back to Episode 3. And guys, before we get going on Episode 3, some new topics for you. We want to settle the smoke on a couple errors we made last episode. Mason?
Not sure how we made this oversight, but Brian Snyder got left out of it. That's a guy that was a personal favorite of mine to watch growing up, so... another one that, shame on me for not catching this. The Moore twins, Josh and Scott, were District 10, not District 9 natives from Franklin. It's a District 10 native. I apologize to everyone in Mercer County and District 10 as a whole.
As I said to Mason, for someone coming from, spent most of my days in either District 1, District 6, or District 3, everything up there in the northwest Pennsylvania kind of seems the same. No offense to a guy from Reynolds like Mason, but District 9 and District 10 are kind of blurred together in my mind, so definitely a mishap on my part. I'll take the fault for that one.
Another thing to note with the Moore twins, Josh Moore actually started his first year, wrestled at Edinburgh, and he finished his career every year after that at Penn State. Scott, we talked about which one of the twins wrestled Eric Juergens in the Iowa duel early on. That was Scott. That was still in the time that Josh Moore was up at Edinburgh. The last thing to note, Mickey Philippi with the transfer to Pitt from UVA is that he won't be eligible next season because of it's an in-conference transfer, and he's already used his redshirt year. So in-conference transfer rules with the ACC require a guy to sit for a year to quote-unquote get adjusted to their new school before they can compete again. So make what you will of that transfer rule, but unfortunately Philippi won't be able to compete next year for the Pitt Panthers, but that does clear up any log jams that they would have there between Fories, Zanetta, and Philippi.
Yeah, and we want to thank Brock Hite for correcting us on those errors we made. That was a really good catch on his part, and once again, we just thank everyone who tuned in and listened and gave us some good feedback. That's what we're all about here, trying to make this thing as best as we can. So thanks to Brock for that. So
start off recruiting. Carnell Andrews, state place winner out of Bishop McCourt, fifth place finisher at 2017 AA States, Cadet Greco All-American. He's going to Bucknell. He joins Noah Levitt and a few of the other guys that they have committed. So the Bison quietly, little by little, building a pretty good recruiting class out of Pennsylvania, guys.
Yeah, and Carnell Andrews was a 132-pounder this year, lost a close one in the state semis to Brian Courtney from Athens. And Mason, we will be talking about at least the 141 weight class here coming soon on a next episode when we preview each weight. And Tyler Smith, a round of 12 finisher this past year, has one season left for Bucknell, I believe, will be a senior this year. So Andrews and Levitt, light middleweights there. One of them will probably slide right in after Tyler Smith. So that's a good pickup for Bucknell in terms of filling their lineup here in the future too.
Yeah, for sure. And I know you had another one. You got another guy that committed out east. Yeah,
true. Like we said, PA Power here. We don't talk about those New Jersey guys too much, but a couple brothers, I believe, heading to Drexel. So that's what makes it worth mentioning. Drexel, obviously, a team out of Philly who's been building in these last few years. Dante and Antonio Menino. At least one of them announced their commitment to Drexel on Twitter this past week. I believe they're both going there. But Dante ranked 16th in the country at 106, according to Intermat, when he wrapped up this season, and Antonio ranked 3rd at 113 in his junior campaign. So those two tough Jersey guys heading to Drexel. So those guys will look to fill out a tough lightweight class that will also be joined by Austin DeSanto, who obviously won a PA state title in historic fashion this past season, beating Spencer Lee in the finals at 126.
Yeah, I tell you what, man, Drexel, they've just quietly under Coach Azevedo, they've been getting better and better. I know that when they joined the EIWA, and obviously that allowed me and my teammates at Lehigh to kind of get a better look at them. They're getting better and better, man. Just I personally had my battles with Kevin DeVoy, wrestled him in the EIWA finals a couple of times. Samato out there doing a lot of great things. So that's a team. Again, they're doing good things, and they sit on a pretty good line as far as being in Philly and being able to pull guys from New Jersey and the eastern side of Pennsylvania and kind of keep kids close to home, but get really high-level recruits close to home, and keep them close to home out there. So they might be onto something.
Yeah, back before the CAA folded as a wrestling conference, when I was at ODU my first few years, we used to have some good battles with Drexel. And like you said, they were never a team that you'd see. Actually, one year they did crack the top 25 in the NWCA poll. I think it was the first time since, I don't know, they said like 50 years or something like that.
Ever since.
Yeah, and they weren't a team that you'd consistently see in the top 25 rankings, but like you said, little by little, they started getting good recruits, getting guys to the NCAA tournament, and were a solid team, and they just keep getting better. So, a good pickup there for Drexel.
Yeah, man, I forgot about the CAA.
Had some good battles with teams in the CAA. Like I said, weren't a ton of powerhouses, but Binghamton back there when Papalizio was the head coach had that team. They were really good. They had a lot of solid guys, All-Americans every year. Boston University, before they dropped their program, had some good guys. Hofstra was up there, yep.
Yeah, that's actually where my older brother went to Hofstra, and that was back in the time like when Weidman, the Patrovich family, all those guys, Charlie Griffin. So they had some good guys up there, but not to get too sidetracked here. So first little thing, Nick Suriano update. Not a ton of new information, but I talked to a couple people close to the Penn State program and close to Suriano back home. So apparently he won't be released by Penn State. And if Kale and the Penn State program, they don't sign his release, he burns a year. Now, having said that, we talked about Philippi would burn a year transferring in conference in the ACC. The Big Ten's got the same rule, but it wouldn't affect Suriano because he's got a redshirt year to use, so he would just have to redshirt his first year if he were to transfer to Rutgers. But because, if it is true that Kale won't release Suriano, then he's going to have to burn a year if that's the decision he makes. So I'm sure that's going to affect Nick's decision. I mean, when you think?
Yeah, just to clarify, Mason, I know we talked about this earlier today, but so Suriano didn't redshirt this season, obviously. Say he transfers to Rutgers, he still has a red shirt. So if he redshirts this next year at Rutgers for the 2018-19 season, you're saying he will have to burn a year or he won't have to burn that year?
So if they do not sign off, right, if Kale doesn't sign off, Suriano right away loses a year of eligibility. He has to sit that first year, a red shirt, none of that affects it. Okay.
Something I've always wondered, because a lot of times you see guys transferring and you wonder if they're going to have to sit out a year, but most of the time those guys have already redshirted. It's usually a later career move, at least in what I've seen. So that's something I've always been curious about. If they still have a red shirt, do they have to burn that next year after the red shirt or not?
Yeah, so, and again, this is the way it was explained to me. I could have misunderstood it. I'm not always the brightest bulb in the pack, but if they do say not.
Engineer from Lehigh.
Hey, dude, I never said common sense. Common sense didn't come with a degree. So, regardless, the fact that Kale won't release him, he does have to burn a year. That's definitely going to make things interesting. To stay in State College, Zain Retherford, along with every one of our world team members this year for the United States at the senior level, went to the Spanish Grand Prix, came home with the gold. I think I saw that Zain only gave up, I don't know if Zain gave up any points. And that was kind of a theme across all of our guys. So just, in case you missed it, Retherford gets, I think that's actually his first tournament win on the senior level, right?
I think so as well. Obviously, the last few years he seems to be mostly have focused on folk style, and then he would go wrestle in the trials or the world team or the Olympic trials, but didn't win it. So I don't know that he's wrestled in too many international tournaments, and if he has, I don't think that he has won one yet.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, Aaron Pico, as we've talked about before, I think Pico's been a huge roadblock to that. But I'm so curious to see Zain on the senior level. When, for so many reasons. Number one, just his pace and his hands are so brutal to watch him wear guys out. I get excited talking about it. I'm so excited to see him be the United States team rep. But the other thing, too, is you notice really, really good boot guys. Like you watch Molinaro get on top of guys in freestyle. And even Zain at the trials. To have kind of a free pass to put a boot in for Retherford, that I'm going to be really curious to see how that plays out, when he does get a chance to get on top of guys at Worlds.
I agree, and just to sidetrack here, go off on a quick tangent, Mason, you just talked about Aaron Pico. Obviously, everybody saw he made his debut in MMA just a couple weeks ago, and it was one of the most hyped-up debuts for an MMA career.
Might be the most.
Probably the most. I'm not an expert on MMA, but I didn't want to make a bold statement there that wasn't true. But what are your opinions on that whole move of Pico, foregoing his folk style wrestling career, even his freestyle wrestling career, to do MMA? Obviously, he's still young, and obviously he's probably going to still do great things in MMA. But were you a little as shocked as I was, maybe, to see how that began for him?
Well, I know that the guy that he fought first wasn't a pushover, wasn't a gimme fight. I mean, I don't follow MMA super closely, but from friends of mine that do, they were all kind of saying the same thing about this guy is, the guy he fought, and I don't even know the name of him, but that he wasn't just a pushover. So from, that same group of friends that after that fight ended the way that it did, they all kind of went, yeah, that's not that surprising if you actually knew what you were looking at. So I think that was just a case of Bellator put him in a sticky situation for his first fight. They should have put him in a position where, let him get his feet wet, let him get a few wins under his belt, and kind of let him get rolling. But as far as foregoing a collegiate career and the rest of his international wrestling career, the freestyle, to forego international wrestling, that one I understand. From a standpoint of he's put in a position where he's been a blue chip MMA and boxing prospect his entire life. I mean, the kid's a Gold Gloves boxer. So that doesn't surprise me, and also puts him in a position where he can take care of his family and everybody financially, right away. So I can understand why you would do that. The one that I just don't understand, and this isn't specific to Pico, this is a general theme, I would say the same thing about Henry Cejudo. Why would you completely forego a college education?
Yeah, and I was going to say the same thing, maybe selfishly on my part, just to get to watch him wrestle in college. I mean, you don't know how the level of his accomplishments, just based on his talent and what he showed just his freshman year of high school when he still wrestled folk style, the sky was really the limit for him. I mean, I was just at a wrestling camp the other day, where I was just kind of perusing the wall, looked at a poster, and totally either overlooked or forgot that those posters they come out with every year. I think it's the A6 USA team or whatever it's called.
The A6 All-American team.
He was number one in the country. He was the guy who had the picture at 152 as a freshman. I don't know when the last time someone was listed as the number one guy in the country as a freshman, but Pico was on that in ninth grade at 152. That's not even at like 106. I think Suriano was on the same poster as a freshman, but at 106, still incredible accomplishment. But for 152-pounder, almost unheard of. I think on the same poster, or maybe 1 year back, Chance Marsteller wasn't even on there his freshman year. He was number 2 behind, I can't remember, number 5. Like, he was a little further down on the list. But like I said, selfishly, probably on my part, I just would have liked to see what that kid could have been capable of at the rest of his high school career and his college career.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, to be number 1 in the country right away, I don't know. I could be misremembering. I don't know that he was as big as 52, but he was definitely above like a 103, a 106. I mean, he was somewhere through the middle, which, it doesn't have to be 152. Just being through the middle and being the number 1 guy in the country, let alone as a freshman, that kid, he had it. So it'll be interesting to see how his MMA career continues to play out. I don't like you said, I don't know enough about it to predict it, but rooting for the kid for sure. But to come back off of that tangent, so another news and notes thing here. Rule changes that were approved for the upcoming college season. Really 4 major ones with different varying degrees. You can now wrestle with a beard, so that's awesome. Poor AJ Shop had that mountain man beard and never got to compete with it. So, we'll see guys with facial hair now. the penalties for violating weight loss protocol, so for stuff like using plastics, sitting in a sauna, those are pretty brutal now. You lose 8 competitions for the first violation and an entire competitive season for the second one.
Yeah, I think the beard thing is cool. I don't know about you, Mason. I know everybody who wrestles in the freestyle, like when we go to universities in the spring, pretty much everybody had some kind of a beard. I don't think you'd see one guy who was clean shaven out there. Probably partly just because wrestling's kind of, I mean, take it for what it's worth, but wrestling's kind of a grungy sport. I mean, I think we just like having a little bit of scruff. It's not really a glamorous sport like some of those other ones where you're trying to look good before you compete. At least maybe that's just my take on the subject, but also just from a comfortability standpoint and from, I mean, I'm speaking for every wrestler here. I mean, when you're cutting weight and you're drained and you're the night before, or the morning of at 5 a.m. getting up to go weigh in, who wants to shave? Like, let's be honest. Who wants to put a bunch of shaving cream on their face and just cut themselves up right before you got to go out on the mat? I'm all for the beard change.
Well, the other thing, too, that I don't think people realize is with how beat up our faces get during the course of a college season, like number one, you're probably showering at least twice a day just because of the frequency of workouts. So your skin gets beat up like crazy between, all the antibacterial soap you use and just the amount of workouts, and your face just takes a beating. I mean, look at the guys wrestling on Saturday at the national tournament. Like, you're all cut up. So odds are you're cut up, nicked up. The skin on your face is taking a beating. So like you said, the last thing you want to deal with is shaving and all that stuff again. I mean, it wouldn't have really affected somebody like myself. I can't really – I'm 24 years old. I still can't grow facial hair for the life of me. But, to guys like Shop or, Kyle Snyder – that can rock pretty solid beards. I'm sure it'll be more comfortable for everybody.
I think they did say something in the rules protocol about there's still a length requirement on how long it can be, something about maybe half an inch or something. So at least in the near future, we're probably not going to see any AJ Shop Grizzly Man beard, but maybe in the future that's something we can look forward to.
Yes, Grizzly Adams did have a beard. So another one, this one's optional, but third-party independent video review. So what that would mean is the way the NFL conducts their video review, anytime something goes to the booth for review, it goes up to an official, I believe for the NFL in New York, that a guy that's never seen the play before. They don't know how it was called on the field. They have no knowledge of what took place. They watch the play. They can slow it down, view it as many times as they want. They radio back down to the field and make the call. So wrestling is now going to have a similar setup. For dual meets, it's optional. It all depends on if they want to bring that third official in to strictly do video reviews. The way I read it and the way I understand the rule for NCAAs, there will basically be a group of officials. I don't know how logistically they're going to do this, if they're going to be off-site or they're going to be up in the skybox in the arena, or locked in a room somewhere, whatever it is. But they'll have officials that are there for third-party review, maybe one per mat or just a couple guys that get called in. So, and the reason that matters in my mind is that, and I mean, if you think I'm crazy here, call me on it, but if I'm a ref and I make a call on the mat, I see it how I see it. If I see video review of it, both for out of pride and just out of, and I've already seen the sequence, and in my mind, I'm going to have trouble seeing it a different way than I did that first time. I think it's really important to have an independent party review it, because if the same guys that made the call initially are the ones reviewing it, they're going to be more inclined, just by human nature, to stay with the call they made.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to show my nerdiness here, but it's kind of like when you're, people always say when you write a paper and then you go back and edit it yourself, you could read the paper 100 times and not catch any errors. But if you give it to somebody else and they read it, they might catch, the third word of the essay you spelled the wrong. Like, I think giving it to somebody else and letting them intervene and get a fresh perspective on it, especially like you said, we're not even sure if these people are going to be in a studio somewhere or if they're going to be right there on the competition floor or up in a booth somewhere. But regardless, I think it's good to have somebody else look at it, especially if it's a pretty controversial call or just one that's highly questionable.
By the way, don't sit there and try to act like you're not a nerd. You were the Elite 89 athlete, so you were, by default, the biggest nerd in the national tournament.
Yeah, and I'm going to steal what you said in the beginning of the episode. Anyone who knows me would tell you that award does not cover common sense, because I've often been referred to as the dumbest smart kid that anyone's ever met. So I could tell some stories, but we don't want to put our listeners to sleep here. So we'll move on to our last rule change.
Last rule change, scrambling rules in the neutral position. I know that any Penn State or just general wrestling fans out there, I'm sure we've all seen the clips from the Gillibon-Heil match in the dual meet last year, where Heil was, if not pinned, about as close as you can humanly be without being pinned. But the rule change now is that if I'm in on a leg or we're in any scramble position on your feet and the defensive guy's back breaks 90 degrees, so if his back is exposed at all, the ref starts a verbal count, and if that verbal count hits 3 without the defensive guy coming off his back, 2 is awarded, and then obviously you get into awarding back points and everything. So I think it's a great rule. I think scrambling is one thing. Grabbing a hold of a foot or grabbing a hold of something and laying on your back to get a stalemate, that's not promoting action. That's killing action, and that's not helping anyone, really, as far as viewers go and what's entertaining to watch. Scrambles are a ton of fun to watch. They might not be my personal favorite thing to have wrestled in, but they're a ton of fun to watch, especially when guys continue action through them. You think of a guy like, we mentioned AJ Shop. He's a great example of a guy that scored a ton of points out of scrambles. But AJ continued to wrestle through them, didn't really lay around, hang out on his back. So I definitely think it's a positive thing. It also, at least you would think, would make the transition to freestyle a little bit easier on guys. So
a couple of the rule changes we've discussed in the past are just the ones that have been changed in the last few years. A lot of them, were frustrating for someone like me who had just graduated and sitting here looking back at it like, dang, I really wish I would have had that. Like, I really wish I could have been able to get 4 near fall points instead of just 3. That could blow a match even more wide open for someone who, was pretty good on top and did a lot of turns. But this is one that I'm kind of glad didn't come into effect. I was definitely somebody who, if someone got in my legs, I was definitely going up over the top. They were coming out the back door, and I was probably putting myself in danger a lot. So this is probably the first rule change I would say that I'm glad didn't take effect during my career. But I will also say, you definitely have to think that this rule comes out of it was inspired by the Heil-Gulabon match, but it almost surprises me we didn't see a similar discussion. Maybe we did, but it didn't reach the level of causing an NCAA rule change back in, I want to say, the 2014 NCAA semifinal with Mike Evans, my high school teammate at Cumberland Valley, who I was actually just with for a camp this past weekend. If anyone who watched that match,
one of the best.
Mike against Chris Perry. There must have been two or three different times in that match where Evans was coming out the back door and Perry was up over the top, crotch lock or body lock, clinging on, and Evans sat back on him and
almost pinned him. Whether
you're rooting for or against Iowa, you got to be objective here. Even as a big PA fan, one who's not a fan of Iowa, but that's my high school teammate. And, I was watching that match, and Perry was every bit as flat as Heil was against Gulabon, and for a longer period of time, probably.
Yeah, it was,
and multiple times at that. So
it was bad.
It's definitely a match. If you've never seen it before, you're probably floating around the internet somewhere where you have to watch that and take into effect these new rule changes that we're going to see next year, and think that that match alone could have promoted this discussion.
Yeah, for sure. And just sidebar, Mike Evans, one of the best mustaches in college wrestling history.
Absolutely. Also probably could be added into one of the best guys to never win it. I think a 3-time 5th place finisher he was, but Matt Brown, I don't know how many times he got the better of Matt Brown, but those two would have 1-point matches or ride-outs all the time. They'd probably wrestled each other like 10 times in college. He'd go back and forth with Storley. He'd go back and forth with Kokish, all those guys. So
that was that era of 174 where everybody, including, there were like 5 or 6 guys.
And any one of them could have won it. He was going to come out as on top, but it was like picking your champ at that weight was not an easy task.
No, they were all ranked number 1 at different points, like Storley, Kokish, Evans, Brown, Perry.
Even Wilt snuck into the national finals that one year, and
Yeah, Wilps.
Controversial call separated him from the title as well. Freaking Wilps was tough.
Yeah, he definitely could have been in the conversation with best guys to never win it.
I'll never forget Wilps on that. We talked about video review. That locked hands call went to probably like a 5-minute long video review, and the whole crowd is just sitting there. It's the NCAA finals. It's the very end of the match. The whole crowd. Actually, I think time had already expired. I think the match was over. The whole crowd's just sitting there waiting on the result of this independent review, and Wilps is in the center of the mat with his foot on the line, just pumping up the crowd. Unfortunately, I think right then they awarded that he did lock his hands, and Matt Brown got the point, and I think that was match over. I don't think he even got a chance to wrestle. I think that's how his career ended. But the energy and the positivity from Wilps, not knowing if he was gonna, his career was already over, or if he had another overtime, another minute to scrap it out. But he was ready for it either way.
Moving on a little bit. So from guys past to guys in the present, looking forward, 133 next year. Pennsylvania guys. Run through them. We got Scotty Parker, returning All-American. Dom Forey's guy that's qualified a few times, spent a ton of time in the top 10. Corbin Myers at Edinburgh. Corey Keener coming from Central Michigan down to Penn State. He's a Pennsylvania native, a couple-time state champ. Joey Gould. DJ Feldman was a national qualifier as a freshman out there at Lock Haven. So that list of guys right there, without question, headlined by Parker and Forey's. Both guys that Parker's been on the podium. Forey's is the guy that's been in the round of 12. They've both wrestled on Friday night. So that's a group pretty solid group there. Could very easily have multiple All-Americans out of it. I don't know. What do you think? Any sleepers in there? Through your eyes?
The guy I really like out of that group, I like all of them, obviously. PA Power all the way. But the guy I like out of this group that I think could really emerge as a top talent here by the time his career ends, and he's still young, is Corbin Myers. Maybe because he's from Boiling Springs, which is just literally 10 minutes up the road from me. But he's a AA guy. Like I said, Mason, I keep hounding you about this AA stuff. I never really watched AA as much throughout my my high school career, and even when I was in college, going back and watching states at Hershey or on TV. But Myers was a guy who was like always a state placer, always in the state finals or something like that. I think he won it at least once, and you could correct me on that, maybe.
I think he won. He was enough after me, though, that I'm not sure. He did cause my Reynolds guys a lot of pain, though. So
yeah, so you're familiar with him. Edinburgh just has a way of I kind of view Corbin Myers the same way I view Dakota Gear. They were both really tough AA guys that came out right around the same year. Maybe Myers might be 1 year ahead of him. Both really highly ranked in the state and in the country. Had really good high school careers. They'd be placing at national tournaments and stuff. And they both came in. I believe Myers might have been a redshirt freshman this year. Gear might have been a true freshman. But both went like 2-2 at NCAAs. But they're those guys that you're going to look at in like 2 or 3 years down the road when they're like seniors. And they're the guys that are going to be high on the podium, I think. They had really tough competition, if I remember correctly, from their NCAA brackets where they ran into some pretty tough guys. But pretty solid careers. Myers was ranked in the top 20 almost the entire year on Intermat, I remember, as a freshman. So I like Myers out of that group a lot. And Feldman, like you said, an NCAA qualifier as a redshirt freshman for Lock Haven, which is another team that we're going to be previewing here that has a lot of young guys that are talented and that are making runs at NCAAs. They're popping up here and there now that Scott Moore's got the reins over there at Lock Haven. So I would say those two guys. And then obviously you got Keener, who's been around forever. He's always been tough, but making the move to Penn State, you never know how much more you can develop your talent even just a year at Penn State. We see it all the time. So
yeah, I agree. I think Corbin Myers always going to root for a AA guy. And by the way, you give me all this flack about AA. We talk about him every week here, so I don't know what you're trying to say with giving me crap about AA all the time, but I'm just going to say it's off base. That could just be a homer call, but sue me. So, yeah, I think Corbin Myers, obviously, is a guy that's ready to break through. Scotty Parker's my guy. He's teammate, guy that took over 133, which thank God, because it was the guy that Lehigh had in at 133 before him was pretty rough to watch.
Was that the guy you lost in the wrestle-off to?
Yeah. Actually, true story. I did lose a wrestle-off along the way, but that might be a story for another day.
I think that's a story for right now.
So, to make a long story short story long, my 5th year, I was struggling for a few reasons that going through some things and just had a bad day and, bad day with some personal things. And I came up into the room and I'd been in class all day. I checked my phone. I'm like, oh, great, we're having wrestle-offs today. So that's an even better situation for me. And I got up, and you know how it. And not to make excuses, because
I was just gonna say this story is just filled with excuses already, and you're about 30 seconds in.
Ryan Palmbrinka, a true freshman out of New Jersey, we went into overtime. I took a bad shot, spun around behind me. So, fun fact, I lost in a wrestle-off my senior year.
Two-time All-American Mason Beckman goes down to a Jersey freshman in the wrestle-off.
Yeah, it was not a good day for me.
That's we're gonna have to tell Jeff to put that as the caption for that segment of the show.
Come on. Anyway, to things that don't embarrass me as much. So something that never had a chance to embarrass me. Fargo just wrapped up last week, and this is something that I'm always kind of curious about. Fargo success, Fargo participation, how does it translating to NCAA? So if you go through the four champs that are Pennsylvania natives from NCAAs, so Darian was a couple-time All-American of Fargo. Retherford, couple-time All-American of Fargo, was a champ. Nolf never went, and Vincenzo was the most prolific out there, was a four-time freestyle All-American, and pretty sure he won a junior Fargo title. So the thing that's always kind of interesting with Fargo to me is you see these states that succeed so much. Like in Illinois is a perfect example. And obviously Illinois is a state that always has very high-level guys. But to me, it's more about the system, and it's more about the state that enables their kids to compete. Because I'm sorry, I know I'm a homer, but if Pennsylvania took their best guys, we would pound the field.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess I'll just be inspired by your ability to make excuses, too, because I've done it my whole life in terms of defending Pennsylvania when people try to say we're not the best wrestling state. Which, by the way, if you attend college and you wrestle or you play a sport in a different state than your own home state, you catch a lot of flack. So I went to Old Dominion in Virginia. Old Dominion, we have a handful of guys from Virginia, the state itself. But as many know, Virginia not a powerhouse in terms of wrestling, so we pull guys from all over the country, and a lot of them are from the Midwest, so there's a lot of pride there. Guys from Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, we got all those guys out there, and they're always so quick to jump on the PA's not the best wrestling state because they don't have the most All-Americans at Fargo, or they don't have the most national champs at Fargo every year, blah, blah, blah. So I've had to defend my case here. Might as well have a law degree at this point in terms of defending Pennsylvania here, but like you said, Mason, if you look year in and year out at the guys who go to Fargo from Pennsylvania, there's a list of a ton that you could think of off the top of your head. I mean, me and you were texting this week of guys who did go, so don't get me wrong on that. But there's a list of, I think me and you were texting, we probably rattled off 30 guys in about 2 minutes off the top of our head of guys who, from our memory, never went to Fargo one time in their whole high school career. And a lot of those guys went on to be multiple-time NCAA All-Americans, national champs, etc. So you have to wonder, why are we not sending our best guys? And Jeff Upson for PA Power Wrestling even posed this question on Facebook and Twitter this week, for those of you who are on it, and he got a lot of responses. I saw on Facebook at one point there was 70 or 80 people responding, and it was interesting just to read everyone's take and everyone's opinion on it. Why guys are not attending Fargo? Is it the cost? Is it the coaches? Is it you just want to take a break in the off season? What do you think?
I know why I never went, and it dealt a lot with internal politics. And I'm not going to name names, not to throw shade at anyone in particular, but to anyone who knows me, I've had this conversation with a lot of people. The politics within our state's USA Wrestling subsection, it turns a lot of people away from it. Cost is what it is. All these other things. Fargo's never going to be a cheap trip for anyone, for any state, unless you live in a North Dakota, South Dakota, where it's pretty accessible. And I think there's a lot of other things now. Being Pennsylvania kids, a lot of guys feel like they don't need to go. They've already got the exposure. Their recruiting profile is what it is. There's more and more national tournaments popping up. Super 32, Flow Nationals. Guys go to Disney, to the NHSCA duels. So there's all of that.
Not to mention Flow Nationals is usually in Pennsylvania. I think at least half or more of the times they've had that tournament, it's been in Pennsylvania somewhere.
Well, and when it started out, it was at Walsh Jesuit High School in Ohio, which, I mean, I grew up in Pennsylvania. I've lived in Pennsylvania my whole life, and Walsh Jesuit High School was about 45 minutes from my house, just over the Ohio line. So it's always been close or in Pennsylvania, meeting Flow National. So I think the rise of other events has definitely taken away from Fargo. But like I said, I personally, politics played a big part in it for me, and I just looked at it and went, I have no desire to deal with that.
Yeah, and I think for me, I partly agree with what you said. Like, if you have the option to go down to Orlando, Florida, and spend a week down at Disney Duels, one, it's folk style. I've always been a way more of a fan of folk style than freestyle, partly just because of my style. Rolling around, tech falling yourself in a scramble is not fun, especially, that's usually what happened. Went out to junior duels one year as a sophomore and went 1-9. Granted, I did wrestle a lot of tough kids. I could rattle them off right now, but
excuses, sir.
Regardless, 1-9 at junior duels. Never went out to that again. Never went out to Fargo in my career. And Disney Duels in Orlando, Florida. You're getting 10 to 15 matches, and if you're in the district all-star division, you're wrestling a lot of good kids from across the country. I wrestled when I went through my senior year of high school, top 20 ranking on Intermat. The weight, my weight, the weight below me, and the weight above me. Probably at least 10 of those kids I wrestled at Disney Duels before, and it's probably gotten tougher since then. So, I mean, you got tournaments like that. Like you said, you got NHSCA Duels, you got Flow Nationals. So those are all part reasons. Who wants to go out to Fargo, North Dakota in the middle of the summer? And I think you have to weigh in every day out there too, don't you? I wouldn't know. Never went out there. But I remember Disney Duels, like we talked about with Mitchell Port.
To Fargo?
Yeah.
You have to weigh in the first two.
Okay. At Disney Duels, you weigh in one time, and that's it. So day 5, as we talked about with Mitchell Port, you could weigh 40 pounds more than your opponents, and it's fair game.
Oh, so, that same year, I cut down to 108 for that team. I came from 130 to 108. I was enormous for a 108.
Exactly my point. So who wants to go out to Fargo in the middle of summer and cut all that weight? I mean, I probably sound like an old wash-up who never had any success by saying that, but I'll leave it at that. But Mason, I was going to say, me and you wrestled on a few freestyle duel teams in the summer. I remember we went to they used to have
Del Val.
I want to say we had one somewhere in Philly, like Oxford or something, when we went with Wayne Danger.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Ed Ruth was on our team that year, I remember. And I was going to say, I don't think I ever saw you lose in freestyle, so it's not like it wasn't your strong suit. So coming from you, it probably means a lot more that you never went out there than for me.
Yeah, well, that speaking of Ed Ruth on that trip, that was the same trip that we had to wake Ed up. Well, so for anybody that doesn't know,
it's the ice cream truck in the background, Mason. By the way, so
yeah, that is the ice cream truck in the background.
Grab yourself a cone if you need to.
Why you can never let it go. T, you always gotta make fun of me. But anyway, Ed Ruth, to anybody that doesn't know, is about the most laid back person ever before he wrestles. To the point that when Tristan and I were on these teams with him, we actually used to have to physically wake him up to go wrestle. He'd be like on deck or in the hole, and somebody'd be like, "Where's Ed?" And we'd go find, like, he wouldn't even be sleeping behind the bench. He'd be sleeping like some random corner of the gym. You'd have to go find Ed, and normally what had happened was he'd been reading a book, fell asleep with the book on his face. We had to pull the book off, wake Ed up, and go, "Ed, you're on deck." Okay. And then you go out and text somebody.
And usually it's somebody good, yeah, like you said. Somebody, nationally ranked or something like that, some state placer. You just go out there, have a sleep, get a quick tech, and then go right back to his nap. So.
Yep. So. Or his book, either or. Yeah. But yeah, so as far as Fargo goes, it's more a product of the state system. The other thing that I think really needs to change with Fargo is the qualification system. Personally, they should structure it more the way the NCAA does, that you don't have to go. It's kind of a difficult comparison to NCAA's, but I don't think you should have to be funneled through your state organization. There should be certain qualifiers. So a Northeast Regionals, the Great Plains, those different things. So you should be able to go, if you want to go strictly through your state tournament and do that, that's fine. That should still be an option. But you shouldn't have to be confined to, if you're going to go to Fargo as a Pennsylvania kid. You have to go through PAWF, and you have to do this, that, and the other thing. If guys want to go, and obviously you're still going to represent your state, but you're not forced through one single organization, if that makes sense.
I feel like that might be the case, though, because I remember back in my day, I think I qualified for Fargo my sophomore, junior, and senior season, and I never went at all. But I remember kids in my weight who didn't even go to the PAWF state tournament that would always show up at Fargo. And a lot of times they were the kids that were really good that would go out and place. Like, they didn't even come. And I don't think they went to any of those regionals either. I think if they were just good and whoever's in charge knew that this guy's going to go get me a medal or go get me a stop sign, then he's good to go.
But again, you're coming back to the people in charge. So it's the powers that be that run the PAWF or the people that run the Ohio State USA Wrestling section. You shouldn't have to go through that specific one. There should be, and I don't have I haven't had the time or dedication to go and draw up a different qualification system. But I know that from talking to not just Pennsylvania kids from other states that don't go, dealing with their state's organization is a huge part of the problem. So there should be a certain criteria, a certain set of criteria that USA Wrestling sets across the board that you need to meet one or all of these criteria to qualify for Fargo. And if you meet them, get yourself to Fargo, you're in, you're ready to rock.
Yeah, I agree. And whatever we want to say, we can't leave out hats off to Illinois. I mean, they dominate Fargo. And I think it gets worse every year now. I mean, it was destruction this year.
Their system is absolutely outstanding.
Their kids, I don't know what their system is per se. I keep seeing people tweet about their system, but those kids buy in, whatever it is. I mean, most of their best kids in the country and in their state, they're going there. So whatever it is, those kids are buying in and they're loving Fargo. They're having a great time. I don't know what they're doing different out there than we are, but I don't know. Maybe I'm pretty sure the PA team still takes a bus from wherever the camp is, Clarion or Pitt Johnstown, all the way to Fargo, which is also a double-sided coin because we say it's so expensive. Why is Fargo so expensive? And then yet they're taking a bus. If you had to fly, it would probably be worse. So, I mean, you argue one or the other, but regardless, hats off to Illinois. They do it right somehow. We're not really sure what they do, but
shout out to Carter Starocki for winning both stop signs at Cadet 1, 52 and 160, I think. 52 in freestyle and 60 in Greco. That's he's one of your AAA guys, but he's District 10 from Erie Cathedral Prep. So shout out to Carter for getting it done in Fargo.
Yeah, and Trent Hidley also had a freaking good tournament. I think he went into the finals without giving up a point or maybe teching all of his guys.
Best outfit, easily.
The jorts were second to none in terms of swag. Unbelievable.
All right, so this is a little off topic, but I'm all jacked up right now, and I can't really contain it. Game of Thrones was on last night, so I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan, so I'm been hyped up about it all day. And it actually got me thinking. So Game of Thrones, for anybody that doesn't know, it's about a bunch of different families, and they're all kind of vying for power in this mythical land. And yes, it's as nerdy as it sounds, but we've already established that Tristan and I are both nerds. So
as nerdy as I am, I've never jumped on the bandwagon for this show. So I'm going to let you do your thing on this, Mason. Go ahead.
Killing me. Anyway, so it's about a bunch of different families that are trying to control this land and win the throne and all this stuff. But what it led me to thinking about was the best wrestling families in Pennsylvania. So, and that's kind of how my mind works. There's general nerdy and then there's wrestling nerdy, and they kind of overlap a lot. So if you had in Game of Thrones, they're called the great houses. If you had your great houses, your great families of Pennsylvania wrestling, kind of who would they be? And I kind of tried to stick this list more geared towards college, but families I came up with, Teague and Ty Moore, so the Moore brothers, who are not related to the Moore twins, but the Moore twins, Josh and Scott, who we've talked about before, they're definitely both on this list. The Hughes twins, John and Russ, both All-Americans at Penn State. John was a 4-time state champ at Benton High School, national champ. They're both high-ranking coaches at Pennsylvania schools, with Russ at Bloom and John at Lehigh. The Cole family, Bill, who legend has it was just the meanest human being on two legs and was the head coach at Penn State for a long, long time, built that program. Rob won a state title while wrestling at Pennsylvania in high school, then an NCAA title down at the University of North Carolina, and has built a powerhouse up in Ithaca with the Carnell program.
And we're pretty sure Bill Cole, if it's the same one that you're talking about, was a 3-time NCAA champ at Northern Iowa. Because I remember when I was at ODU, going in and working out at Northern Iowa's wrestling room and cutting weight and looking up on the banner on the wall and saw Bill Cole's name up there, 3-time national champ, and I think in the late 1940s. Not even sure if they were D1 back then. Not sure, but it was weird to make the connection because I used to live in State College for a while. The Cole family is very well known up there. Thought they were always a Pennsylvania family, but went all the way out to Northern Iowa. So I'm assuming that's the same Bill that coached at Penn State. 3-time national champ in his own right.
It sounds right, and the time frame fits. So to keep rolling off of that, you've got the Santoros. So Pat, who was my head coach, was a 4-time All-American at Pitt, 3-time national finalist, 2-time champ. Actually, fun fact, Pitt's only 4-time All-American ever. So take that one to the bank. Who else do I have on this list? The Bonomos, Ricky and Rocky Bonomo. I believe they both won state titles at Lake Lehman High School up there, all the way up by the New York border. Ricky won 3 national titles at Bloomsburg College, and Rocky was a multiple-time All-American. The DiAugustinos for the Pittsburgh people out there. Gus, the father of the group, was the head coach at North Allegheny for decades. He was the head coach of the teams that included Teague and Ty Moore, that included Ray Brinzer. That North Allegheny team in the 80s, I think it was the 80s, maybe it was the early 90s, but that team was one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country. He was also, in his competing days, the first ever national champ at Lock Haven, so there you go. There's an answer to a trivia question. The 3 DiAugustino boys, Mark, Mike, Scott. I always get Mark and Mike mixed up. I'm pretty sure Mike was the one that won 3 state titles for North Allegheny, and then Scott won himself a state title as well. So that family there, especially if you talk to Whippy people, out here in the Pittsburgh area, they are the stuff of lore. And then the most obvious one, by far, is the Carr family. So the Carr family from up in Erie, a name that I'm sure we've all heard. Everybody knows Nate, right? Olympic bronze medalist, 3-time national champ at Iowa State. Pretty much won everything under the sun. Has medals from all over the world championships, then Olympic medal, as I said. But to dive down deeper into the Carr family, there were 8 or 9 brothers. 5 brothers in the Carr family were NCAA All-Americans. The only family in college wrestling history. They're not the best wrestling family in Pennsylvania history. They're the best set of brothers in college wrestling history.
Yeah, Mason, and we're big proponents of I'm a big proponent of making fun of you on the show, and then collectively we're big about making fun of ourselves. So it's worth mentioning that when we compiled this list originally, we completely left the Carr family off. We had about 6 or 7 families on here, and the Carrs were nowhere to be seen. So
yeah, and especially me personally, because I coach
on that District 9/10 region of Pennsylvania.
Don't give me 9/10. It's District 10.
9 is blurred. The line is blurred between those. Somewhere up there in the sticks of Northwest Pennsylvania. That's your homeland. You'd think you would have done better.
Yeah, actually, here's a great Nate Carr story. So Nate Carr wrestled in high school right about the same time that my dad did. And they were coming in. My dad wrestled at Reynolds too. And they come down to Reynolds. Erie Tech is the name of his high school. They come down to Reynolds for a dual meet. Nate was, the baddest guy in the land. And he was bumping the whole way up to 160 to wrestle. Now, mind you, Nate wrestled in college, I think, right around 141, maybe a little bit bigger than that. But suffice it to say, wrestling 160, Nate could have weighed in soaking wet in 5 layers of clothing, and he could have made 160 without a problem. So that's pretty much what he did. He walks in and gets on the scale, and it's the dead of winter, right, in northwestern Pennsylvania. And Nate steps on the scale in his pants, flannel shirt, hat, winter coat, and boots. Steps on the scale, and he was so light, he was still like 3 or 4 pounds under. And the ref kind of looks at him and goes, Nate, come on, man. You got to take your stuff off. I'm like, fine. takes everything off, weighs in like 15 under, and goes out and just victimizes one of my dad's high school teammates. But anytime Nate Carr comes up, that's always my dad's favorite story, that he was just such an animal. Could literally weigh in with full snow gear on, wrestle that weight, and still torch whoever he wanted to.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, it's his son, right, Nate Carr Jr., that's a coach at Lock Haven right now, which, as we said, is one of the teams we're going to preview here soon. So he's on staff there after wrestling NAIA maybe for 2 years and then finishing out his career at Iowa State, I want to say.
Yeah, he was Iowa Central Community College, I think.
Yeah, JUCO. Okay. And David Carr.
Just won OW of Fargo.
Exactly.
Junior freestyle. So he's good at wrestling. They live in Ohio now, unfortunately.
That's safe to say.
But he's good at the sport of wrestling.
Mason, you can't overlook your Lehigh boys, the Cruzes here, which we're going to talk to Darian this episode, as a matter of fact. NCAA champ Darian Cruz. I never get sick of saying that. NCAA champ Darian Cruz. He, as well as his brother, Darian was obviously an All-American, took 8th as a freshman, and then an NCAA champ. Seventh. There you go. 7th.
Come on.
My mistake. He beat Earl Hall for 7th?
He did beat Earl Hall for 7th.
Okay, mix that one up. Somewhere back there in the memory. But Randy Cruz, an All-American 2 seasons ago, 2016 at 141. Was he 7th too? Maybe 8th?
7th. Oh, no, I apologize.
You lost to Joey Ward for 7th?
Yeah, you were right, that one. Randy was 8th. Lost to Joey Ward.
Okay. That was my teammate Chris McCarty's bracket, so remember that one. And then cousin Richie Cruz, a state medalist for Bethlehem Catholic, and their father, Randy Cruz, coaches at Bethlehem Catholic.
And Randy Cruz, the dad, the best dressed coach in high school. Best dressed coach, if I could get my words right, in high school wrestling. True story. Next time you're at any tournament where Bethlehem Catholic is present, pay attention. Big Randy never disappoints.
And I got to throw one more personal family on here. Some people might argue in terms of college success if this family is on here, but the Peppelmans go without saying. Maybe I'm biased because I'm a District 3 guy, even though they're from our high school, it's Cumberland Valley's biggest rival, Central Dauphin. But the Peppelmans, Marshall, a 3-time Pennsylvania state champ and runner-up, so 2-1-1-1 in AAA Pennsylvania. I think he had like 4 losses in his whole career. One of the best high school wrestlers I ever saw in my day. Walter was a 3-2-1-2, I believe, in PA, and then a 2-time All-American at Harvard. Marshall never got on the podium in college, but had a pretty solid career. He wrestled at Cornell for a few years before ended up transferring to Lehigh, right? Probably your teammate for a year or 2.
Yeah, Marshall and I were teammates. We had some good times together. He, at one point, had a dog that could pass for a bear. That's completely unrelated to everything, but he was walking his dog one day, and I truly thought somebody set a bear loose in Southside Bethlehem.
That would be an interesting sight, considering Bethlehem is just every time I've been to Bethlehem, I just think it's smoky and smoggy, pretty much. Just a big hill. The whole campus is on pretty much a hill. Is that right? Lehigh's campus?
It's on the mountain. It's on the side of the mountain.
And it's just so cloudy every time I go there. The way people in other states talk about Pennsylvania as being the state where there's never sunshine, it's just always cloudy and rainy, I've always got to defend my case. But I will say, the way I, from someone who's not from there, envision Bethlehem, that's how it is.
No. Maybe you just bring the clouds to Bethlehem. All right? I loved it.
I can't imagine it's too much better out there in Reynolds, though.
I loved it. We had a good time. Well, okay, at Reynolds, there's just nothing to do. That's why I think we're so good at wrestling. There's nothing else to do.
Yeah, and we got to throw out there, I know some people toss this idea around, and some people are aware of this, but Mason, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it true that Reynolds, who is probably historically the best AA wrestling school, don't you guys not even have a wrestling room? I heard you guys roll your mats out in the cafeteria.
That's a fact. Every night we have to. So the junior high goes in right after school ends, and they roll the mats out, mop them, tape them, all that fun stuff. Junior high kids work out. They leave. High school guys come in, work out. Our managers, mat mates, pull the tape up. We roll them up as a team and go home, and you do it all over again the next day.
That's incredible. Just for thinking about how entitled some people are these days, especially. Even in the sport of wrestling, but I mean, wrestling has some of the toughest kids, but just thinking about high school sports these days, the entitlement is kind of high, but thinking about that, you guys, the best team in the state, pretty much year in and year out, or one of the top 5 at least, don't even have a wrestling room. Roll out your mats in the cafeteria.
So, stat of the day to give you an idea of our program, the tradition there. First year they ever had wrestling, they were 4-4. The worst record since was 12-5.
Yeah, that's impressive. I mean, Reynolds, everyone, even if you're not a AA guy, you know the name Reynolds. Probably most people throughout the country, when they think Pennsylvania wrestling, Reynolds is one of the schools. Even if you're not familiar with the state and don't know where it is or what division it's in, you guys have D1 recruits and national level kids year in and year out. But just to close up that thought about the Peppelmans, Colton was a pretty solid high school wrestler. I think he placed at states at least once or twice, went on to wrestle at Harvard as well. And then Garrett, a 2-time state champ, took 5th as a freshman, won it as a sophomore, ran into Chance Marsteller in the finals as a junior and got 2nd, and then won it again as a senior. And now is still young in his career at UVA. I think he's got at least 2 years left. Hasn't made it to the NCAA tournament yet, although he very well might have this year. I think he got injured right at the end of the season and got pulled from the ACC bracket, but he's got a couple years left of his career, so I think the Peppelmans are absolutely worth mentioning on this list of PA's best wrestling families. I mean, anyone who's wrestled in high school in the last probably 15 years definitely knows the Peppelmans name.
Yeah, I'd agree. And to go back to the Carr family real quick, the one guy you have to touch on is Jimmy. So Jimmy, everybody knows Nate. Jimmy Carr made the Olympic team in 1972 at age 17. He's the youngest wrestler to ever make a United States Olympic team. Was an NCAA All-American at the University of Kentucky. He won Midlands as a high school senior, and in the process beat the defending national champion Mark Massery in his home gym at Northwestern. So, Jimmy had some things outside of wrestling that kind of pulled him down in his college career and later life, but one of the greatest high school wrestlers ever. I mean, again, the guy made a world team at 16, made an Olympic team at 17, beat the national champ, and won Midlands as a high school senior. All of that by age 18. So
rest in peace to him, but yeah, an absolute
for sure
beast on the mat. And one story I got to throw in here about the Cars while we're still on the topic. I think I told you about this before, Mason. Down at Old Dominion, my coach Steve Martin runs the Granby School of Wrestling. We have those camps all over the country, and we used to run one out in somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Mexico, Missouri. We ran the camp out there. We had a team from Kentucky come up. I remember this team because Nathan Boston was one of the top guys in the country coming out of high school. He was in Dapper Dan in 2014, I think. He came up with his team from Kentucky, and one of the coaches of that team is one of the Cars. I'm not sure which one it is. He always wore West Virginia stuff, so it could have been Michael Carr, but it could have been any of them, really. I'm not sure. But I just remember he'd come out, and during our team's workout, in between sessions, he'd come out and scrap with us, and he would always just have sneakers on and just like a baggy West Virginia T-shirt. And so, Steve Martin, my coach, would throw one of us with him in between goes, and, we all thought, we're going to wrestle some old dad with tennis shoes on and catch our breath here before we have to go get another hard go. And as soon as you shook hands with that dude, you were going for a absolute ride of a blast double from one side of the mat to the other. And that dude was one of the quickest, most explosive guys I've ever wrestled. I mean, no matter who Steve threw out there with him, whether it was one of our All-Americans or, it didn't matter. He blast double across the room in his tennis shoes. So those guys are freakishly talented.
Oh, yeah. I've grabbed the hold of a couple of the Carr brothers. Jim Akerley, the guy that was my club coach and I coach with at Quest School of Wrestling. He's good friends with the Carr family. They're still to this day, like you said, any of them, you're going for a ride. All right, and now we would like to welcome onto the program 2017 national champion, Division I national champion. He was a 2-time Pennsylvania high school state champion in AA, mind you, Tristan. A Pennsylvania native through and through, a guy that I am lucky enough to call a good friend, a former teammate, Darian Cruz. Darian, thanks for coming on, buddy.
What's going on, Beckman? How you doing? How you doing, Tristan? Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Awesome to have you on, buddy. So, I mean, first and foremost, just what have you been up to? Obviously, NCAA's in March. You had the trials out in Lincoln and everything.
Yep.
But, what's the life of Darian Cruz been like since NCAA's and just the past few months?
I mean, it's been pretty awesome. Pretty laid back summer. One cool thing was I've been able to travel a lot more. Do some camps here and there, and see other states, and how wrestling is developing in other parts of the country. Actually right now I'm out in Seattle, Washington, doing a camp, and I was just in California, and I was just in Chicago, and Ohio, Jersey, West Virginia. I've just been traveling around doing camps, and like I just said, kind of just seeing their different cultures and basically seeing how wrestling is developing and developed, in their states, and it's pretty cool. Honestly, I could tell you it's a little bit different almost in each state. For example, Cali, they had a lot of girl wrestlers at their camp, which was, being a PA wrestler, there's not a lot of girls in our camps. You know what I mean? Like at the high school camps, like they had a camp, and there's the whole mat for girls. You know what I mean? Just seeing how diverse.
But yeah, I mean, how'd you just get different people calling to come out and do camps? People you know?
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, just a couple of people I know. A couple of people, reach out to like, Coach Pat and Brad and Hughes. You know how Hughes is. Hughes knows everybody and their mom. So he's So he's doing that all the time, always trying to hook you up. And of course, I have the Lehigh camp, which I love running every year. We got the little guys and then like kind of the intensive high school guys, and it's so cool. Especially being able to bring home a national title. Hosting that camp and giving back to the little kids and helping them develop and become better wrestlers and most importantly better people.
Darian, you just talked about obviously you're the national champ. We're about 5 months removed from the NCAA championships. Has that really settled in that Darian Cruz is an NCAA champion, or is it still kind of surreal in your mind? Like you said, you're going all around the country doing camps. Is that kind of a new role you're fulfilling, or? Yeah,
I mean, honestly, it is. It's funny that you say that. I still kind of just think back and laugh about it because, I put in the work, to win a national title, but the manner that I did it in, it really took a lot of deep digging, like that match with Gilman there, and it came down to the wire, and then the match with Lezak, hitting that move that was like kind of made up for my brother and just kind of modifying it a little bit, but honestly it's still surreal, but honestly, it's nothing that anyone can take away from me. So, and of course, next year's on the mind. So there was this whole summer has been time to be excited about it, and it was awesome. It still is awesome and cool, But I still got to gear up and kind of slightly stay sharp over the summer, So I can just roll in next season without any problems. But don't get me wrong, I'm so happy to be able to travel and do these camps and just take time off because I'm a big believer in absence makes the heart grow fonder. So I'm totally cool with being off and hang out with my family, friends, and sometimes travel just not for wrestling camps or anything, but travel just for fun. So yeah, like honestly, like I said, I still wake up and laugh once in a while, but it's kind of sinking in, and I'm kind of smiling about it a little bit more.
So you spoke a little bit about like kind of turning the page, and obviously there's always the thought of next year.
Of course.
How have you gone through the process of kind of obviously processing what happened? Everything in St. Louis. You got your pictures up on the wall in the facility now and everything. How have you kind of just reset the mindset? As Hughes always said, and kind of start to gear up for next season.
I mean, the people I'm surrounded by, tremendous help. Of course, I got my family. Gonna love me no matter what, and support me no matter what. And then I got my coaches, who are always reminding me, hey, take your time. You've been a national champ. It's awesome. Let it set in. And then I got my friends, like one of a kind, who always make jokes about, they're like, oh, you think you can do this because you're a national champ now, huh? And it just makes me laugh because they know the type of person I am. You know what I mean? Like, you know how you've been on Team Beckman, and you know how some of the guys.
No, dude, I got you.
And stuff like that. So, like, you know, I got great friends that keep me humble, and you know, they poke fun at it, but you know, they love you, but honestly, it's a good way, you know, to keep you on track and you know, make sure that you're still keeping that in the back of your mind. You know, when it's ready to go, you know, you strap your boots on and get back to the grind. And honestly, you know, there's like I said, I'm a huge believer in absence makes the heart grow fonder. So I mean, I'm mentally fully ready for that time to come. You know what I mean? I'm ready for the time to strap my boots on. But as of right now, you know, I'm still kind of laying back and just enjoying my summer. You know, summer's maybe like we're about like a month left maybe, and maybe a little bit longer. So you know, so the time to gear up is right around the corner, and I'm ready for that. You know, mentally, like I said, my friends are a big part of it. Family, just people that support me, and for the fact that you know the culture that we're in, so competitive. You know what I mean? Wrestling is such a competitive sport, and everyone's getting better younger. You know, so that's on the mind, of course. You know, seeing these young guys do some pretty amazing things. So you know, just staying competitive and you know, wanting to compete and be the best year in and year out. So that's one big thing too.
Darian, you actually touched on one thing I wanted to ask you, maybe a little different than a lot of the questions you've probably been pelted with over the last few months since you won NCAAs. But when I look back on my wrestling career, one of the big things that I feel that I was fortunate to have was a brother who was close to the same age, close to the same size, also an accomplished wrestler. You know, wrestling's such a demanding sport physically, but also mentally, and it's nice to have a brother, in my case younger, your case older, who's there, you know, to confide in and everything like that. I just want to ask, how much of an impact did Randy, who had a stellar career at Lehigh, was an All-American, how much of an impact did Randy have on you winning an NCAA title and just the success you've had so far?
I mean, he's had a huge part, you know, and just having someone be there that you don't really have to talk to, you know what I mean? You don't have to physically speak words to. You know, the connection you guys have, and I'm not saying I haven't had teammates like that, you know, but me and Beckman are pretty close, and I'm not saying there aren't teammates like that. I'm saying, like, but just for the fact that, you know, you cannot talk to each other for a while, but you guys are still brothers, and, you know how you guys are feeling, and you know how to, you know each other in and out, you know, so that's like an unspoken, like rule that, you know, if any of you guys need help on anything, you're always going to be there for each other, you know, and again, I'm not saying that there aren't any friends like that. It's just, with a brother, it's that much easier. You know, you grew up together. You really learn the sport together. So having my brother on the team is just, you know, just nails on the coffin, you know, for me being successful. And, like, honestly, I'll give all my success to my brother, Randy Cruz. I won't be ashamed about it. You know, he was the one that, I know in your case, you know, you said your brother was younger, but being the younger brother, you know, I'm sure he asked your older brother, or younger brother this, he'll tell you the same thing. Randy was the first one to get into things before me, you know, whether it was trouble, whether it was like school, whether it was wrestling, you know, he was the first one getting into it, and I got to see it, you know what I mean? I got to see it a year earlier. So imagine, it's almost like me looking into the future, you know, every transition to the level of wrestling, you know, like elementary to middle school to high school, and high school to college, you know, so I got an insight, you know, I'm a senior year in high school, and I get to hang out with my brother and hang out with his friends, and you know, go up and wrestle around with them, and you know, it was sweet. So it's like, honestly, I can wholeheartedly say, you know, I give like 90% of credit to my brother, you know, just because he's been there, you know, and he's done that, and you know, just someone that can support you and that you see at the dinner table all the time, you know, with your family, and just the support was awesome. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I give all the credit to Randy. He's an awesome dude.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you know, you and I have laughed about it before. I think you and I rolling around during one of the off days while our camps were going on was your first workout, you know, when you moved from Becca. And
exactly. I remember you calling me about that.
Yeah.
You said, hey, you want to work out? I said, sweet.
And, you know, I remember the kid you were at that point. I remember that, you know, the young man that you, and I know the young man you are now, and how much you've grown and things have changed. And, you know, and we've never really talked about this, but being close to home, being around the Becca program, being in the Valley and everything, obviously we all know the kind of support the Lehigh Valley has for wrestling. Has staying at home, through the dog days of the season, through the tough days of anybody's career, has that helped? I got to believe that's helped a lot.
Absolutely. And, I mean, and Mason, you could probably answer this too, there's been times where I brought in friends around the Lehigh Valley just because I'm so close. I brought in teammates. We go out to dinner around the Lehigh Valley, a little special spot, or we go back to my grandparents, right down the road, or, we go to like a local match, a local tournament, we're just around the Lehigh Valley, we do things around the Lehigh Valley that you do as a team, and Lehigh Valley is going to support, I'm out here in Seattle, Washington, and nowhere, I have to say, everyone asks, where's Lehigh? And I have to say, an hour 20 from Philly. That's every time we travel, and Beckman will tell you that. Everywhere we travel, to other big schools to wrestle, like, Lehigh, where's Lehigh?
Yep.
And so, but everyone in the Lehigh Valley, big supporters of Lehigh. You wear a Lehigh shirt, you're getting kids coming up to you asking questions, you work for Lehigh? My son goes there, or, I went there, and the history is so rich, so being close to home helped out huge. Honestly, it was cool being really close, because they're right down the road, but don't get me wrong, I try to avoid, staying home as much as I could, just for the fact that, I knew I had to grow up, and when I was at college, I knew I was at college, but just for the fact that I had the luxury of, if anything went wrong, or if I needed laundry, if, any emergency went down, home was so close. So it was kind of like a cushion. But yeah, just a big part of it, a huge part of it. Not just me, but for the team.
You touched on this a little bit earlier in the interview. Similar question along the same lines. I know you said you're a big proponent of taking time off, which is a great thing. I think some people don't put as much emphasis on that as they should. But so maybe you haven't even thought about this yet. But when you start getting back in gear for next season and you start thinking about your senior year and start training for that second NCAA title, do you feel as if your mindset and your training will adjust a little bit, knowing that you're kind of the guy with the bullseye on his back now? Because coming in this year, you weren't the returning NCAA champion, but next year you will be.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. The mindset changes slightly, just to remind. I think it changes slightly in the sense that the only thing that changes is the fact that yes, I did win the national title, and that should only be the thought of that should only be a reminder of what it means to work hard and how confident I should be in my workout, because honestly, next year it comes around, and no one next year when it's 2018, you can't win a 2017 national title. You know what I mean? So nobody can take that away from me. So I have that. 2017 is mine. So it's my mindset. What I'm thinking about is I'm going to get this year's one. You know what I mean? I'm going to get 2018. So I'm going to take it. So right now, honestly, I don't even think I have a bullseye on my back, because it's something that, it's something that I don't have to defend anything, because it's something that it's going to be mine forever. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I'm in the mentality is that, I'm still going to do what I did last year, but like I said, there's a slight adjustment. And you got to adjust to the rules. The rules are changing every year. They have new rules now, and our coaches do a really good job with that. And just stick to training and stick to what I know how to do, which is wrestle. Honestly, before I went out, every match, every dual meet, or every match at nationals, the last thing my coaches said to me before I ran out, no matter how nervous I looked or was, the last thing they would say to me before I stepped on the mat was just, "Hey, go out and have fun and do what you know how to do best, which is wrestle. Go out and wrestle this kid." And that's the real thing that really kind of helped me out there, because we all know how to wrestle. You've been wrestling since you're 4 years old. It's just whether you can perform or not under pressure. So that's basically what I'm gonna do next year. Just keep train as hard as I can, and train to be the best. Don't train to come up short, and just use the idea of me being a national champion already. Just use that as motivation, and the fact that, and use that confidence in the fact that I've been there, done that, and it's just time to get another one.
Any kids are listening at home, or even coaches, I would say Darian Cruz is one of the top guys I would think of when it comes to someone who's just always cool as a cucumber out there wrestling. I mean, if you just look at your NCAA tournament this year, your first match, you go out, you draw Dylan Peters, who's a 2-time returning All-American, and you just go out and pin him in a tilt in 40 seconds. And then your next match, you got Shakur Laney, who's, you know, one of those tough, like, freshman or sophomore, young guy, hasn't been on the podium or anything. And, you had a tough, I think it was a 1-0 match, but never at any point did you look, you know, some kids go out there and get flustered when they're in a close match, especially if it's with someone they think they should be beating. But, you know, and then, like you said, you keep progressing in the tournament. You wrestle Gilman, you wrestle Lezak. You're pulling out crazy moves that people haven't seen, and you just stay composed the entire time. So I think you're the epitome of someone who stays cool under any circumstance.
That means a lot, my man. That means a lot. Especially coming from you, man.
It's true.
So, you know, you mentioned talking to Coach Pat, you know, Coach Santoro for anybody listening in. You mentioned talking to Coach Pat before the finals, and obviously, you know, you and I both know what he's like behind closed doors and before you walk out on the mat. And not just him, Hughes, Coach Dillon, Darius, Coach Buxton, everybody. You know, after all the whole ordeal of whether or not Coach Pat was going to stay or leave and all these other things going on this spring, I mean, just, you know, talk a little bit about all that those guys do for the program, because I firmly believe they don't get near enough credit for all that they do for Lehigh wrestling. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to get the situation, but the situation was tough, and, you know, decisions had to be made, and, you know, of course, people from the Lehigh Valley are going to get upset, but, you know, time goes on, and, you know, the time is healing, and, but, yeah, after the national situation got real sticky, and, you know, the team was kind of walking on eggshells. He went out to Pitt and interviewed for the Pitt process. You know, he brought a team meeting in and, you know, just said, hey, boys, it's my alma mater. They took a chance on me, you know, so out of respect, I'm going to hear what they have to say. I'm not saying I'm taking the job, you know. I'm just being respectful, and, you know. So he went out there and then, you know, came back and said, I'm staying at Lehigh, you know. We were so relieved, and you know, it's just where Coach Pat belongs, you know, and just for the fact that he is such a family man. That's one reason why, you know, I went to Lehigh. I'm out here in all these camps, and, you know, people don't know where Lehigh is, and they ask me a bunch of questions like, oh, why didn't you go to, you know, ODU? Why didn't you go to Ohio State? Why didn't you go to Iowa State? Why don't you go to Penn State? You know, all these big schools. And, you know, one good reason I could say is that, you know, the schools are all awesome. You know, they're great schools, coached by great people. And I just remember just connecting with Coach Pat on that family level. You know, I talked about how I'm a family-oriented person, and, you know, I'm kind of close to home. I'm not saying that, you know, I don't want to travel, you know, outside of Lehigh, but, you know, I just fell in love with a great man in Coach Pat. You know, his personality, you know, his passion, both physically, mentally, emotionally. I just, you know, I think it fits me perfectly. You know, I need somebody as a coach to build me up like that. You know, I'm not sure how it would have turned out anywhere else, but you know, I can say, you know, through Coach Pat and Buxton and Hughes and Coach Brad, you know, all the coaches. I keep saying Coach Pat because, you know, he's the head coach. He's the one that kind of takes the heat and the glory, you know, whether it's hot or cold in situations. So, I mean, it's not all of them, for the fact that, you know, they're worried about building up the man first, but you're in the process of being a good wrestler. You know what I mean? And you knew how it is, Mason. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
For the fact that, you know what I mean? Like, just because they're more worried about you being a good person, which is so underrated. Because if you're not a good person, you know, I mean, there's people that get away with whatever. And I'm not saying you have to be a good person. You know, I'm just saying that you know, he cares about you as a person. He wants your morals to be right. You know, he wants you to be polite. You know what I mean? Off the mat, that is. You know what I mean? On the mat, you know, you remember him telling us stories about him being a savage. He was an animal on the mat. And people that have wrestled and have seen Pat said that, you know, he was a crazy man in the practice room. You know what I mean? And that's something that I need, you know, and that's something that I am, you know. I'm a nice guy. I'm polite, please and thank yous. But when it's time to turn it on, I'm ready to go. And that's someone that, that's why I think we clicked so well. And, just having Hughes in the mix was, crazy and just off the wall. And we'll tell you to pick something up and just carry it, move it over there just because, he doesn't matter. And then you got Brad, the technician, who's just willing to drill with you until you figure something out. And he'll repeat it over and over and over again. I feel like I was just thinking about that Marshawn Lynch video where he just keeps saying over and over and over. That's what I was thinking about that, because he will totally just keep going.
Oh, he'll be there for days on end
until you pick it up. So, and just the dedication that they have, and now we got like Buxton and Darius, who are just like, Darius is such a good athlete in the room, and he's not always saying the best wrestling technique, but he knows how to pump you up, and and you see him in my corner at both those matches. He didn't really say specific moves. He had his times when he did, but he just said the right things to get me pumped, or like get me motivated, or get me focused. You know what I mean? And that's a combination that you need. And Buxton is just the wisest man, wisest old dude that I've talked to in a while. He's so wise, and one cool thing about Buxton is that we traveled to like tournaments like the Open and the trials and stuff like that, and I see all these like high up athletes going up to Coach Buxton and just picking his brain. I see Burroughs coming up to him and saying, "How you doing, Buxton? What do you think about this?" And I see Kyle Snyder. I see all these all the coaches like Zadig and people, the faces of USA Wrestling, just talking to Buxton and picking his brain about what he thinks about certain stuff. So just have that type of wisdom, like sitting in the wrestling room is just unbelievable. So, of course we were walking on eggshells when Pat was, through that whole decision process, but we're blessed and we're thankful, to have him here for the next 5 years. So we're just going to continue to have fun and hopefully produce more national titles.
Yeah, speaking of that, Darian, we've been previewing a different Pennsylvania college team with every episode. So we're on episode 3 now, and fittingly, Lehigh is the team we decided to preview. So we don't want to keep you too long, but last question for you, just give us an outlook on what the fans can expect from Lehigh next year. Obviously, you got veterans like Scotty Parker's an All-American down low.
Oh, yeah.
And then looking through your lineup, you guys really don't have any holes. I mean, you got guys like Cutler, who probably would have been an All-American,
mm-hmm.
and you got some young
mm-hmm.
guys that are really talented up top, like Jordan Wood and
mm-hmm.
Jacobson
mm-hmm.
and Chris Weiler. Just go ahead and give us a quick preview of what you're expecting from your team next year.
We're going to be young, that's for sure. We lost people like my brother Minotti and Ray Garner and Dougie, and we lost too many guys, but boy, are we going to be young. You got me, Scotty, and then you got young guys like Luke Cam, Pomeranka, and we got guys like Cortland, who can go to 49, and we got people like 57, I got my roommate Drew Longo, we got Cole Walter, we got a whole bunch of young guys, and we have a whole bunch of guys at that middleweight that, can fill in very, very well, and Cutler's been having an awesome summer, he's been training at the OTC, so, and I think he's going to be moving up in weight, so that's huge for the team, because he's going to be feeling good and happy, and then we got young guys, like you said, like Chris Weiler and Wood and Jacobson up top, who are excited. They're chomping at the bit to get out to the big stage, especially, me being able to bring home a national title, they get to have a slight taste of what it means to, be a national champion, because, I didn't do it by myself. So, yeah, we're going to be young, and the fans can expect, some young talent, so, don't underestimate these guys, so if they're ever, picking pools, don't be afraid to pick one of these young Lehigh guys.
Absolutely, man. And obviously I'm never afraid to, but, hey, obviously, once again, thank you for coming in, man. Thank you for joining us, talking to us. Always a pleasure. Thanks for giving the rest of the Pennsylvania wrestling world a little look into life as a national champ and into the Lehigh program. So always a pleasure, bud.
Of course, man. Thanks, Mason. You too, Tristan. It means a lot. Thanks for calling me.
Yeah, Darian,
absolutely.
Darian, I got to say, from watching your post-NCAA interviews and just from talking to you briefly right now, you're definitely the prototype for representing PA Power the right way on and off the mat. So keep it up, and good luck next year, and go get that second title.
Of course, man. It means a lot. Thanks again.
Yep, take it easy, bud. Yep.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, I think that's going to just about do it for us on episode 3. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. Feel free to hit us up on any social media. Give us your feedback. Let us know what topics we should use. I'd like to thank Darian Cruz one more time for joining us today, talking a little wrestling. Twitter handle @Toy, TOI, Cruz23. So give him a follow. Follow along on his journey to title number 2.
Yep, as Mason said, that's going to wrap it up for us at the PA Power College Podcast, Episode 3. Thanks, everybody, for dialing in. As always, I'm Tristan Warner. Find me on Twitter @WarnTriz. And as always, my partner Mason Beckman @Beck_Diggity. Fans, you can visit PAPowerWrestling.com for all your wrestling needs, and be sure to follow us on Twitter @PAPowerWrestle. And go ahead and friend us on Facebook. Stay classy, wrestling fans. Until next time.